So we are into week 10. We're trucking along here. So what's going on today? Well, today we are going to finish our shopping cart. We're going to integrate the Stripe payment API, and then we're going to use scaffolding to generate an order history and order details views. And then we're going to need to do some customization as well as some authentication checking around it, so that users can view their own orders but can't view anybody else's orders. So we're going to look at doing all of that today. I've marked everybody's assignment 3 already in world record time if you've submitted assignment 3. So far, I think of 37 people in the class, I think I've gotten 30. Super high mark. So class average, 13.5 out of 15, which is really good. It was designed to be a pretty easy 10%. I don't think many people had much of a challenge with the security implementation, which is by design. I mean, working with .NET Identity, it's supposed to be easy. Microsoft is trying to make it easy for us. So still waiting on a few. If you haven't submitted, please submit so that you can get some marks. I don't really like giving zeros, but if I don't have anything to grade, you leave me with no other choice than to give out a 0. So 21 people out of 30, 70% of the class got 90% or better, which is great. Okay. I'm not going to give out assignment 4 until next week. I know, Yulia, you were asking last week, but the reason is we haven't covered any of the content yet in the course, and we're not going to cover it until next week. So I don't want to give out an assignment where there's no context. And it's not really related yet to the lessons. So actually for this week, you actually will have nothing to do at home. There's no quiz and there's no assignment at all to do this week. So let's fire up our, yep, I know. Yeah, and Yulia, I appreciate that. I think it's great that you do, and you give yourself time to get your assignments done on time and to give yourself help. And normally I like to give them out early, but I also don't want to give out the assignment before I've taught the stuff in class, because then you really aren't able to start. So we will go over assignment 4 at the start of class next week. Okay, and then we'll spend lessons 11 and 12 doing unit testing. So, and I believe you'll have 2 weeks to do that assignment. So let's open up our grub shop. I'm going to close everything except the shop controller. We're going to do a lot of work. No, I guess I'm going to close everything. We are going to do a lot of work in the shop controller today. So let's get our app running. So a shop, put something in the cart. So here's how we left it last week, right? We could add to cart, we could remove. So a couple small things we want to do for starters here. Number 1 is we should fix this up, right? When there's nothing in the cart, it makes no sense to show these table headings. We should actually show a message here instead saying the cart is empty with a link to start shopping. That's number 1. So we'll add a little if statement into the cart view so we can determine whether we're going to show this table or whether we're going to show a message. Number 2, we have no way to get to the cart right now other than shopping. We want to put a cart link up here in the nav bar so that no matter where we are in the site, we can get to our cart at any time. So let's maybe do that first. Let's go to the layout file. We'll add a cart link. If we have time later in the class, we might be able to add a little, like a badge showing the number of items in the cart. We didn't have time to do that in my lesson yesterday. We'll see if we've got time today. I figured out a way to do a few things. Could we add it over beside the login? Yeah, I don't see why not. We may just have to look. So let's open up the layout file. Let's see how it is. Excuse me. So we've got our nav bar starting on line 18. So you're saying we could do it after the login partial. Yeah, I guess we could, but that original list is closed. So if that's the case, we'll also need a UL tag over here. So sure, we'll do that. So I'll add another UL. I'll just use the same classes. We'll add an LI tag. So our ASP controller will be shop, and our ASP action will be cart. And the text on the link, it will say cart. Whoops. If we've got time later, we could also look at using like an icon instead. We'll keep it simple for now, and if we've got time to kind of pretty it up later, we will do that. So I'm going to put this after the login partial that shows the register and login buttons at the top right. It does push things over. I think maybe, not sure I want this flex grow. Yeah, okay. So now we have a way to get to the cart from anywhere. So now let's open up the cart view. Again, we've added lines 43 to 47, a UL, an LI, and an anchor tag. So now we want to open up the shop cart view and add a little if statement. Before we render that table, we want to make sure there is at least one item in this user's cart. If there isn't, we'll show them a message instead. So we'll find that under views, shop, and cart. So right now, it just renders the table no matter what. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to contract this just for a minute. So our model, it's got a count. It's a little tricky here. We have both a count method and property. We need to use the method. So if our model.count is greater than 0, that means the user has at least one item in their shopping cart. I'm going to move that table inside that if statement. Okay, so all of this code is now inside. So it's easy. Visual Studio at School lets you expand and contract the HTML elements. What do you want to do if there's nothing in the cart? What should we see on this page if the user clicks cart, but they haven't done anything? Yeah, display a message and point them towards the shop. Exactly, so we'll say maybe So we'll put on a message. We will link back to the shop index. The ASP controller is optional because the cart page is we're already inside the shop controller. So we want to call the index method of the same controller. So we can add the ASP controller, but it's not required. And then I'll just format my code, select everything and format it so everything gets indented and nested properly. So if I go back to the browser and click on my cart, we should now get this message with our button. And as soon as we put something in the cart, we'll then see the table. We'll go try it out. Cart. I need to build the solution. Sorry. Before that code will run, we need to compile it. Right, it's got to compile the views DLL. I'm bad with the shortcut keys. It's Control K, Control F. We'll do the formatting. So make sure you build. So now, right, we go to our cart. It says the cart's empty. Put a couple things in the cart. And now as soon as if I remove them, now our message and our button is visible, our table heading disappears. So this is the result that we want. Fairly simple. Okay. Yes, Alex, here's why. You are probably missing the brackets. So the count, it is a property, but we need to use the actual count method call instead in order for that to work. Okay. Dan, here's the layout. So after I've highlighted in blue the new code, and it's after our login partial. Alex, did that fix your problem? Okay, cool. Dan, are you good with the layout file? Okay, great. So now we want to add 3 more things to the cart. We want to calculate a running total and display it here. And then we want keep shopping and checkout buttons at the bottom of the table as well. So let's go and add all these things. So inside our table, up here, first let's declare a variable. We'll call it total. I'll initialize it as 0.0, so that way the compiler will automatically interpret that it's a double. If I just do it as 0, initialize it to 0, it's going to treat it as an integer. So by making it 0.0, the compiler knows we may have decimal values here, so it's going to use double. So we'll initialize that to zeros. And now inside of our loop, right? We'll increment our item dot price times our item dot quantity. So we're going to figure out the total for each line item and then increment the total. Nothing fancy, simple math. This should not break any brain cells in a third-year programming student. Okay, so we're going to do the basic math and then just increment it, add it to our running total. So now down at the bottom, we want to display this total. And we also want to display keep shopping and checkout buttons. So that's going to happen after our loop. Right? So when our for each is done, right here on my line 57, we're going to add another row. So I'm going to put the keep shopping button under the quantity. We'll put the price here and we'll put our checkout button here. So we'll have nothing in the first two columns. So one way I can even do this, I can either make two blank columns. I guess I'll just, or I could use a call span, that's fine. I'll just make two blank columns. So in our third column, we'll have a link to keep shopping. So it'll just return to the index. So the button will say keep shopping. It'll return to the main page. Again, we click a category, we carry on. So our fourth column, this is where we want to display that total value, and we're also going to format it as currency. So we'll use the currency format that we've been working with and our total variable. And in the last column, we're going to add a checkout button, and it's going to call a new action that we'll build next called checkout. Okay, so this row that fits inside before the ending table body, that should give us a footer row for our table. So you can still see all the new code. So now it gives me a total. I want to get something else. If I remove something, my total gets updated each time. Yep, so inside the if statement, and you could also define it up here. It doesn't really matter where you define it. We just need to define it before the loop starts. So we defined it on line 9, and we are calculating it on a running basis on line 29. Okay, so our next step now, we're done with the cart page. Our next step is we need a get and a post method for checkout. And then we'll need a checkout view. And we can scaffold this. We're not going to have to build the view from scratch. Visual Studio is going to build the checkout page for us. So we're going to want to go to our controller. Step one is write a get method called checkout. That will just return a view. So this should be pretty simple, straightforward. Let's go to the shop controller. We got quite a bit going on here. Now, up until now, users can shop anonymously. They can put stuff in the cart. However, at this point, we are not going to allow guest checkout. So we're going to add the authorize annotation here. Users have to log in at this point if they're not already logged in. In order to use the authorize annotation, we'll need to make this reference to the .NET Core authorization library. So please go ahead and add that reference. And now we can define our checkout method. All we're going to do here is return a view. Simple. So what should we do next? User clicks the checkout button. It calls the checkout method. Thank you, Julia and Scott. That's right. We will now create the view. We can scaffold the view. Of course, we're going to have to make a few changes to it. Yep, that's right, Manjinder. That's exactly what we're going to do. Thank you. We're going to right-click the method name. We're going to add a view. We're going to pick a razor view. The second option here, it's not going to be empty. Just pick razor view and click add. The name automatically gets copied here. Our template is going to be create because we want the checkout page to display an empty form. As our model class, we're going to use our order model. So we're not going to save the order right away because there's still more things that have to happen. But the order model provides the data template for our form. Everything else, we'll just leave it as is. So we really only had to do two things here. Change the template to create and change the model class to order. Your view name should be called checkout. The data context is here as usual. Our usual options are enabled. Excuse me. So just go ahead and click add. So here's our form. We'll go check it out, and then we'll have to make some adjustments. Go back. So each time my app restarts, it wipes out my cart. You pick razor view, not empty view. Razor view. So now when I go to checkout, first thing it's going to do is prompt me to log in. Now this is going to become kind of tedious, so it's going to make our lives easier if we just log in at this point, and then we won't have to keep logging in every time. So I will log in as maybe with my customer account. Later on, I'll use my Google account. Doesn't really matter which login you use. I'm going to log in. I But again, added my view, but I did not build my solution. So it's not aware of this file. Okay, I'm going to build again. You know, actually, I think I will just log in first. I'm going to log in, buy a few avocados. Oh, see, I've got lots of stuff in my cart. That's okay, because my cart is tied to my user ID. Alex, you don't have the option. Are you running the debugger? Is your debugger active? If your debugger is active, I don't think you can add files to the project while the debugger is active. Okay. I can always upload to GitHub and you can grab the code. You know, I'll just do that now anyway, in case you need it. So you can go ahead and grab, it's pushed now, so you can go ahead and grab the checkout view if you need the code. Okay, so I'm going to click checkout. I'm already signed in. So here's my form. Okay. So what things do we need to do here? It's functional, but it needs some work. There's a bunch of changes required here. Okay, we could reformat it. Yeah, Manjinder, what about the total and user ID? Okay, we will pre-fill them, yeah, but we also want them to be hidden. I agree, Amar. They shouldn't even be in the form, right? Users should not have access to those. We're going to just calculate the total, same with the date, the user ID, payment code, we're going to also hide. Scott said we should have a dynamic order number. We will, but we're not actually creating, that's going to happen later, Scott, because we don't want to actually save to the database. We're going to have to do the payment first. So, yeah, that's right. Fatima, we're going to do that. The order date is also going to be filled programmatically. The user shouldn't be able to enter it. That's right. Okay. So let's go and make some of these changes. We want to get rid of total. We want to get rid of order date. We want to get rid of user ID and payment code. We also might want to set friendly aliases for first name, last name, postal code in the order model. And maybe we can probably get rid of this heading here. So I'm going to get rid of my H4 on line 9. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm just going to change the text. I'll say all fields are required. So users know when they're filling out this form. And now we can get rid of the fields that the user is not going to supply, but that we're going to calculate behind the scenes. So our first form group here, the total, and our second form group here for order date, we are going to fill these things automatically in code. The user can't modify them. So let's just delete those. So that makes first name the first form group here. I'm going to get rid of the one for user ID as well. So after address, we just have city. And I'm going to get rid of payment code. Two other changes down at the bottom. Our submit button, instead of saying create, We'll just have our button maybe say payment. And this back to list, this link that the scaffold gives us, we're just going to remove that. We don't want it. Okay, so we got rid of total, order date, user ID, and payment code. I changed the subheading here. I removed the back to list link, and I changed the button, the text on the button, so it says payment. So this is better. And we can quickly just jump into our order model and add aliases for the properties that have multiple words in them. So let's go to our order model. And let's add for first name. We'll just add a display that includes a space. I'm going to do the same for last name and for postal code. Actually, even though we won't have it on this form, I'm also going to add an alias for order date. Again, I'll put a space in here because some of our other pages later, we're going to display that value. So I'll just create it with a space. And I'll do the same thing on postal code. So any of the property names that are multiple words, we'll give them a friendly display name that includes a space. If I go back and look at my checkout form again now, all of those multi-word labels should now have spaces in them, which they do. So our checkout, we had three parts to our checkout. The get method, which was really simple, one line of code. Generating the form and customizing it, we've done that. And step 3 is we need now a post method. What happens when the user clicks that button? So we're going to have to go back to our shop controller now and write the post method for this. Again, this method also requires our user to be logged in. So what we need to do in here is we need to bind each input to the corresponding property of an order object. So we haven't done this manually. We have it in our code already. We can see it in our controllers that we scaffolded. So for example, when we are adding a product, on file, in our products controller, here's our create post method. We are binding the list of inputs to the properties of the object, and then we're creating a new object. Well, there is no payment here. Payment is next. So we're going to have a separate payment method. I mean, you're free to call it what you want, but I'm going to be making a separate payment method for the next part of the process. Sorry, we have a double name issue. No, I haven't finished the method header yet. We need to do this. We need to add the property object binding. We're going to call bind here. Sorry, we need it in square brackets. Bind, and then round brackets. And then we have a string with the properties we're binding. So we're binding first name, last name, address, city, province, postal code. So we're binding these 7 form inputs to the properties with the same name. So we are binding them to an order object. So now the method signatures are different. Yeah, I was just jumping over to the controller to show you how the scaffolding does the binding. But we're going to do it. We got to do it manually this time. So we want to autofill total, the date, and the user. So these 7 properties of the order, they get filled automatically from the form. Right? As long as our form input names match the property names, it automatically maps the values. So for our order total, let's see, how do I want to do this? Actually, hang on. We'll come back to the total. We'll do the total in a minute. Let's fill the date as datetime.now. So we'll just get the current date and time. Our user ID is equal to our user.identity.name. So it gets the email address of the user who is currently logged in. There's a couple of different ways we can get the total. We'll see if we can do it in one line with a query. I think we can. Let me think. And we'll try it this way. So we're going to query the cart items with a where clause. We're going to filter for this user. And then I think we can actually do the math right in here. So for each item, we're going to calculate the subtotal, and then we can actually sum them all together. Yeah, I think it will let us do it. So this is actually, I mean, we could do it in multiple steps. We could first go and fetch all the cart items, and then loop through and write the logic to first calculate quantity by price times each item and keep a running total. But using this link query syntax, we can actually do this in a single line of code. Go and fetch this user's cart items, figure out the total of each line item, and then add them all together in a single line of code. Now, we run into a little bit of a challenge. We've got an order populated, right? We have all of the fields we need, but we don't want to save it to the database yet. Why not? I mean, you could save it to the database, but probably not a great idea at this point. Right, Amar? User hasn't paid yet. So until they provide a valid payment, yeah, that's right, Alex. There's no point saving this all to the database and generating an order number if we don't have a successful payment. So we now want to store. Yes, Alex. So that's exactly what we want to do. We want to store the order in the session so then we can continue on to the payment. And only if the payment is successful, then do we save the order to the database. So here's the trick. Save order to session. So we can keep it in memory for saving once payment gets completed. So we'll use our HTTP context.session. The problem is we've got an issue here. There are 3 set methods. This one saves an array of bytes. This set method creates a session variable that's an integer. And this one saves a string. The object we want to save is none of these. It's an order object, right? It's our own custom class. In .NET Core, there is no native way to save a complex object as a session variable. The only options we have are save an array of bytes, save a string, save an integer. There's no way to save an order. So, well, Scott, we are going to do that, but we're going to use a little extension library for this. Yes, Attila. There is a library that does exactly that. It's an open source library with 2 methods. It will convert to JSON and then serialize an object to JSON and deserialize from JSON back to the native format. But it's not built into .NET, so we're going to have to go and get that library. Okay, and it's not through NuGet. No, it's not actually a NuGet package. The link is here. Oh, I didn't put it up. I apologize. Let me throw the link into it. Bear with me for a second. Yes, we are going to use Newtonsoft under the hood. Here, put the link in the chat. I'll put it up in the week 10 folder. So here is the session. So it's a few years old, but it still works great, right? It explains that right now we've got set in32, and set string for bytes, integers, and strings. So there's no method available for storing complex objects. This is exactly what we want to do. So there's a little class here called session extensions. So it's a static class, and it's got a set object and get object methods. So set object takes it, converts our object to a string and serializes it to JSON. Okay, I'll have to check that one out, Scott. I've just been using Newtonsoft. And the get object is the opposite. It reads this JSON string, converts it back into our native object. So here's the link directly to the code that we need. I'll put that in the chat as well. So I'm going to make a class called session extensions, and then we'll just paste this code in. So in Solution Explorer, in your root project, the Global Grub project here that's in bold, just right-click it and add a class, which we will call session extensions. In Pascal case, so capital S and capital E. So that just gives us an empty class file. Then I'm going to go back to the raw code from GitHub. And I'm just going to copy this and overwrite the initial class declaration here. So I'll just take that out. And I'm going to paste this in. There are a few references we need. So the iSession interface will need to reference microsoft.aspnetcore.http. And then for the JSON serialization, deserialization, this library requires the Newtonsoft JSON package. So it's just basically a JSON parser for .NET. And as Scott mentioned, Microsoft now has their own, but for years they just kind of relied on Newtonsoft. I'll also just put a link in here. I'm just going to go back and grab that link. Whenever we're using third-party code for a couple reasons, we should reference it, one, to give the developer credit, but two, maybe at some point down the road, something changes. And we might need to go back and find the source again. You know, a year from now, something breaks or we have to do something different, and we don't remember where this code came from. So at least I've got the link here. We can always go back. Okay, so I'm just going to save that. Attila, when you say it's missing from where? You mean you don't get the option? You can try adding that reference manually. If that doesn't work, you can also install Newtonsoft from the NuGet package manager. You might, if it's still not recognized, yeah, you can go to NuGet package manager. You can manage the NuGet packages for the solution. And you can search here and try installing. Now we created it right in the root. So you can install, you can see how popular Newtonsoft is, 1.4. So now the class it goes right in the root. It'll put it right at the bottom, just above your startup. So yes, you can install Newtonsoft if you needed to. So now we should be able to call the setObject method here. And this will allow us to save our order into a session variable. So we'll call setObject. So now we get the setObject method here. So we're going to create a session variable. So the setObject just needs a key and a value. We'll call it order. And the value will be our order object here. The last thing we want to do is redirect to the payment page, which we'll build next. Okay, I'm just going to try this out. If this works, then the result in the browser should be our URL should wind up at shop/payment, and we should get a blank screen because obviously that method and view don't exist yet. But this should at least tell us whether it actually saves to the session object. So I'll build. Make sure you build because we've added a new class file. We'll go back to our cart. So I'll fill it out. I'll fill out my checkout page and click payment. Okay, so nothing crashed. That's good. We got to the payment. So everything we've done so far, I think, is working the way it should. Okay. All right, it's 11:52. I'm going to upload to Git again, just in case you're behind, you've missed anything. So checkout is complete with complex session var. So what we are going to do when we come back is now start on the payment. So we're going to have to configure an application in the Stripe dashboard. And then we're going to have to do some configuration work in our site so that we can work with Stripe. And then we're going to start integrating the payment process into our cart. Yulia, you would need to implement some kind of Ajax API for that. So you would need you would need to use something like Google Autocomplete API. So you need the places autocomplete. So there's an integration guide, I think, here. So something like this in that's what you're looking for. Okay, so if you wanted to try to integrate that, this is the API that you would need. Or it's one of the ways you can do it, probably the most common way. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Let's take a break here. We'll come back at 12:05, and then we'll start working on our Stripe payment integration. See you in 10.